Hello and welcome back to the Azure Terraformer. Has it been a month already? We're back at it with the Azure Terraform Community Call for September. This time I was actually able to be there because I wasn't jet lagged from flying back from China. Boy, my arms were tired. But today I thought I'd sit down and react to the community call that I was actually a participant of. This call was really great. We actually had some other folks, non-Microsoft folks, come on video, which was really cool. And we had some ad hoc presentations that were pretty exciting. I was actually responding feverishly in chat, as I'm sure you'll see in the video, to just questions that came up, from the attendees about different topics and things like that. So I didn't fully get to engage in the ad hoc presentations that were being presented. So I thought, I should probably go give it another look and give you guys my hot takes, or not so hot takes, on what we talked about at the Azure Terraform Community Call. This is actually an official Microsoft thing. As you know, my channel is not an official Microsoft channel. It's just my own personal thing. It's a hobby. It's a thing that I do for fun to try and help people that are trying to terraform Azure. But this call is actually the official Azure Terraform Community Call run by the product team themselves. So Stephen Ma and Mark Gray are actually the driving force inside of Microsoft, at least from an Azure standpoint, for Terraform. And they have all sorts of goodies. They've got a blog, they've got a Slack channel that you can join. I'm on there. A lot of other Azure Terraformers are on there as well. And they do this monthly call to get direct feedback from you. So it's a great opportunity to ask direct questions to the product team, give feedback directly to the product team, hear what's going on in the Azure Terraform community. And if you got something to share, just raise your hand and I'm sure Stephen and Mark Gray will give you a chance to say your piece. Anyways, without further ado, let's drop in on the call and get things started.
Okay. I'm going to talk about something I've been looking to talk about for a while now. So we've been working hard at AzAPI. If you haven't heard of it, the 5-second version is that it's it's another way to use Azure stuff without waiting for any sort of manual implementation or merging into the AzureRM repo that has previously existed. AzAPI just released 2.0 beta 2 days ago. We were intentional about trying to get that in before this call because we want all of you to go ahead and use that and give us your feedback on some of the features. I do not have extensive scenarios built out for every single thing under the sun here, but a few things I'll call out. Number one, if any of you have experience with Bicep, there's a concept called pre-flight. We've managed to integrate that into the Terraform plan stage. So the simplest example off the top of my head is if you go define an OS SKU and it like Mark as the name, then it's going to say that's not a valid SKU and it'll just throw an error. The nice thing is that that'll happen before you try to do a apply on like 50 resources and end up with a messy state file.
So that's kind of interesting. That I assume that's only available with the AzAPI provider. So this is like a little bit of a different strategy than what I've been doing with the input variable validation and actually querying Azure for the valid values to do that check as part of the input variable validation. This is actually doing a pre-flight. So that's pretty interesting. I'm not quite sure how that all works. If you know anything about the Bicep pre-flight feature, throw something down in the comment section below. I'd love to learn more. Definitely something I'm gonna have to go check out. One of my pains with Bicep historically has been like the what if functionality. So I don't know if pre-flight is replacing what if, or if it's like, the same, but with a different name. But I'm definitely going to have to check that out. It also looks like there are a ton of new provider functions in the AzAPI provider. Build resource ID. Okay. Probably, it's going to take like n number of parameters, sub ID, resource group name, resource name, etc. And it'll construct the resource ID from the names. So if you got the names, you can build an ID, which is that, segmented URI essentially. Parse resource ID, which we have in the AzureRM provider. subscription resource ID, tenant resource ID, management group. So it looks like different functions at different scopes within the Azure topology. So that's kind of interesting. I'm not, maybe those are like different like overloads for the build resource ID. I don't know. I'll have to go check that out. If you know, throw that in the comment section below. Would love to know about that. So it looks like there's a flag called enable pre-flight on the provider block for AzAPI that you just set to true, defaults to false. And if you set it to true, it's going to do this pre-flight stuff, which that's kind of interesting. That must be doing some sort of like API call to ARM with a tentative API command or API call that you're going to make, and then asking for validation feedback on before it actually sends the request. I don't see why that couldn't be built into the Azure RM provider as well, right? So if we have this capability, why not build that into the Azure RM provider as well? Because AzAPI is still using the individual ARM REST API endpoints. It's not compiling like an ARM template and then just blasting it out there like Bicep does. So this should be possible with the Azure RM provider as well. So I'm gonna have to talk to Stephen and Mark about that, because that would be a nice addition to have kind of feature parity between the two providers. And it looks like it's really small, but I mean, it looks like there's a retry field, which allows you to maybe specify, maybe this is a nested block or something. It does not look like it's a retry count, because it says you can specify the retry configuration. So not quite sure how that's going to be used. I would imagine this is probably built into the Azure RM provider anyway. I'm a little bit surprised why this would be exposed in the AzAPI provider, unless this just allows you to override the defaults that the provider uses internally, which is not that bad. Like, again, maybe that's something that we can put into the Azure RM provider as well. So interesting. It looks like a couple of provider blocks default naming prefix has been removed, which I didn't even know this feature existed, but now it's gone anyway. So I assume this meant that it would automatically add the prefix to the name of the resource that you provisioned using AzAPI, which I suppose eliminates the need for an extra set of string interpolation. But, I mean, generally that seems like a bad practice anyway, because then it's less predictable for the reader of the code, right? The code author. The code author probably is aware that this is happening, but if somebody goes and reads the code, they're going to be looking at the name field and they're not going to be seeing what the name is actually out in the Azure subscription. So I actually like the fact that this was removed. That's good. And that seems like the big things from the breaking changes.
Can you expand into it a little bit?
Yeah, let me make that bigger. How's that?
Yeah, I probably should have waited for that.
Nah, that's good.
Sorry about that. The other one is that we've officially removed any and all JSON traces from 2.0. So there is no JSON in the properties, there's no JSON in the outputs, there's no JSON in this anything essentially. And that should also mean that you can just work with HCL and stuff like for each and all those different things that you are much more acquainted with. They're all going to live inside of here. There's a retry field here, which essentially lets you keep trying to make the same fetches. Everyone, I think a lot of people here will be familiar with like long running operations, and sometimes you just need to keep doing the get until you return the 200. This retry field is going to go ahead and help you with that.
Again, I'm not sure why this isn't just built into the provider anyway, unless this is just overriding it.
We have response export values here, which was a way of kind of helping with outputs. And what we ended up finding is that it's a little bit noisy when you try to just response export values like a SKU, it would give you properties, or it would give you body and then properties and then SKU and then SKU name. It's just a little noisy. We decided.
Completely agree. That was I think one of the difficulties about using the AZ API provider is that rather than having a nicely defined inputs and outputs kind of contract for each resource, you have this like deformed claw of a complex object that's an output that is not extremely clear like what's in it. So you'd have to spend a lot of time doing Terraform console to like figure it out, and then do a bunch of JSON parsing to like get the values out that you want. It just felt pretty brittle, right? Particularly if something subtly changes in the way that comes back, you're looking for index 0 or index 1 of the outputs, and now it's index 2, right? I mean, it seems like a lot could go wrong.
I decided to use JMES path as a query expression to essentially give you just the final thing. So if you utilize that, you'll end up with SKU name equals D whatever from there.
So that, I mean, this I'm digging deep here, right? This kind of, I think this is like essentially the same thing as XPath, but for JSON, right? I think I would have to double click on this, but which doesn't feel super great, I mean, maybe what Steven's talking about here is like they've made it so that it's easier to do JMES path, to like basically spearfish, a particular value out of this JSON blob. But I'll have to try this out. Like I don't know what this experience is like firsthand, so I'll have to check it out in an upcoming video.
There's a lot of really cool stuff here. That's just a few that I managed to call out in the moment. AzAPI's extension, the VS Code extension, is also in beta, so please make sure to install the pre-release version of the extension if you haven't. That has some really cool functionality going on. We have a paste as AzAPI functionality that's in there now, so you can go and copy resource JSON from the portal and essentially do.
By the way, look at all these people on video. I just want to say thank you, guys. Like, this is making the Terraform Community Call feel that much more like a real community. Like we're actually just in a room together, just like talking about Terraform and Azure. So this is awesome. I actually recognize some of these names on here. Jeremy, Hafidi. Yeah, I mean, it's awesome stuff. Hopefully, peer pressure, we can like encourage more people to come on video and make it, that much more like of an engaging experience. Like, we are real people. We are Azure Terraformers. And, this is our time. This is your time, to have direct, touch points with Stephen Ma and Mark Gray, the product team behind Terraform at Microsoft. So, what a great opportunity. So it's awesome and refreshing to see people hopping on video.
Do a Control V or a Command V if you're a Mac user, and it'll just immediately shoot everything out in AzAPI. We're still trying to fit a little bit more functionality into that one before HashiConf, and then hopefully at HashiConf we'll be able to not only have 2.0 officially release for the provider and the VS Code extension, but also we'll be able to show you some other cool stuff that is coming up. So definitely make a try at using the provider. Highly recommend it. Gonna help you a lot in these scenarios where you're gonna want to roll out a different resource version for this or that reason. One thing I forgot to mention is the AzAPI to AzureRM tool. This tool just went ahead and also went into a beta release. If you aren't familiar with the tool, we've had.
That's kind of cool because now that we're maintaining these two providers, the AzureRM and the AzAPI provider, the question has come up many times from people. Okay, well, let's say I follow the common use case of using AzAPI for a resource or a service that's brand new, doesn't have AzureRM support, and a couple months later, it now is supported by the AzureRM provider. Like, how do I move back? And of course, That's going to be very similar to what happens with deprecated resources. You're going to have to remove from state and then re-import using the AzureRM resource. So it sounds like we have a tool that possibly might make that easier. So that should be pretty interesting. Let's hear more about it.
This story for a while now where we kind of talked about AzAPI and we said, hey, if you need to migrate over to the AzureRM provider, you can use this tool to do so. The biggest problem with how we built the tool originally was it wasn't very CI/CD compliant. We just released a new v1.15, and that should actually go ahead and help you out with some of these migrates. So,
what does it mean to be CI/CD compliant? Maybe it's more. Maybe what he's talking about is it's like a more interactive CLI experience as opposed to like a command line tool. Maybe that's it.
Is that going to work for me? The way that this works is that it will go ahead and take a look at something. I just use a simple example for time's sake, such as this list of resources and tell me what it's going to plan to do, and then I can run AzAPI to AzureRM migrate. That will take a bit, so after I get it running, I'm going to go ahead and show us some other quick tools. The big thing that is happening is we're in the process of renaming the tool, and we are in the process of adding functionality to go in the reverse, so from AzureRM to AzAPI. So
that I think this question came up on the call as well. And I was at first like aghast, like, oh no, nobody should ever be doing this. But no, I think the same thing could happen. Like you could, maybe the service is supported by AzureRM and you provision it with the AzureRM, provider. But then there's a feature like that just becomes brand new that you absolutely have to have. It's like the killer feature, right? And then it's like, well, those attributes, that nested block doesn't exist on the AzureRM resource. So now what? Are we gonna, click ops that, or this path, which is, hey, maybe we need to shift this to AzAPI, take advantage of this feature, and then we can move back at a later point in time. So the interesting stuff.
The idea now is, hey, overnight rollout of a new service, like behind the hood change, break your resource. Hey, go to roll it out on AzAPI and you can just switch to a different API version for that resource. Similar thing going on here. If you wanted to go ahead and move this to AzureRM for whatever reason, you absolutely can. So it'll always be a little slower, I guess, when I'm using my screen sharing, much to Dominic's point. John, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, how's it going? I have a question around last year at HashiConf. We chat about how AzAPI could become a first citizen rather than AzureRM. Is that still a vision, or are you guys going to maintain both AzAPI and AzureRM?
I think what he's saying is there were some rumors that AzureRM might be replaced as the primary provider. I've never heard that. Okay. But it's definitely clear that AzAPI is going to be a first-class citizen, right? In that, you can use them interchangeably. You can move between them. You can use one. You can use both. And, it's really up to you to decide what you want to do. In my opinion, I think you should absolutely mash them together where it makes sense. Me personally, I prefer AzureRM. I don't see that changing anytime soon. But, like AzAPI is an absolute superpower for those edge cases that aren't supported in AzureRM. I just hope that we don't because we have this like perceived easy button of the AzAPI, that we don't neglect the hard work to build a robust and well-maintained AzureRM provider, handcrafted goodness, in lieu of the code-generated one. But I know there are different schools of thought. Let me know what you think in the comments below.
So we're in the middle of releasing well, we're working with HashiCorp and we're working on a statement together. The intention is to maintain both. AzureRM and AzAPI are considered critical parts to customer success. So the ideal here is that essentially you get the best of both worlds. AzureRM is going to be sort of massaged for you to make a lot of things easier in terms of configuration simplicity. AzAPI is there for anything that you want to digest complexities for to get greater controllability on the micro level and use a fine-tooth comb over all of that.
Yeah, and I think what he's saying there is like there is some finer grained control over the Azure API that's being used by AzAPI. Although I don't know. I don't know how realistic that is for people to run into on a day-to-day basis. If you've encountered this before, where you're trying to use the Azure RM provider, but like there's some API issue, Azure API issue, versioning issue, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear the use case. I just haven't personally encountered it. So I know a lot of the bicep folks, like, they brag about that. I'm like, I don't know. I don't get it, don't get it at all. To me, it's a little bit about like bragging about the spoiler on your car. Like, what is the spoiler even used for? Like, okay, yeah, it's there, but like, why do I need a spoiler? I don't know. Like, okay, you have a spoiler. You can change the Azure API version, but like, why would you do that? Why would you want to do that? Why do you need to do that? Let's talk, practical use cases here, not absolute weird ninja edge cases.
Okay, looks like this thing's going to run for a bit. While that's going on, I wanted to shout out what Jared was talking about. There's a learning path now for Terraform on Azure. I went the wrong way. This is something that we've been really hoping to have for a while now. If you have anybody on your team who's onboarding to Terraform on Azure work, if they want to get started or learn, just point them to this. It's a really wonderful resource to get people started, and we hope that this will be the first step towards a lot of helpful learning paths in the world of Azure Terraform. It's not too long. It's only 30 minutes. Just helps introduce a lot of the concepts. As I've mentioned a lot of times before, we have a lot of Terraform documentation. We have a lot of Azure documentation. The world of understanding how those concepts interact with each other, that's kind of what this is all for.
So yeah, shout out to Jared Holgate for driving that to conclusion, to an outcome, a tangible outcome. That was fantastic. I'm on a little bit of an internal SWAT team to produce that content. So far, like I've got my module that's assigned to me. I think Jared took that first one, so props to Jared for getting that like wrapped up in a bow. If you got complaints about the icons, bring those to me. Throw those in the comments below, okay? Because we're trying to get the Terraform logo on the icons, but basically we had all this documentation ready to go. Jared produced this module. It's wonderful. Like, we want to ship it, but we didn't have icons. So I pulled up Photoshop and I just ripped off the bicep icon and we ran with that. So that if you're wondering, like, why do we have this weird dark blue cube, that's just blank. We're working to get the Terraform logo in there. I actually photoshopped some pretty nice, versions with the Terraform logo. But, legal stuff. We got to get that sorted out. So hopefully we'll see those dawn the Microsoft Learn site here pretty soon. But I am working on that. Again, I don't do Terraform for my day job, so it's more of a passion project, like I do on nights and weekends, kind of like my YouTube channel. It's not part of my day job, but it's something that I'm trying to help out across the org at Microsoft. So
let's see if that finished. Looks like we ran into a bug. Well, that's awkward. I love when things happen live don't work. Leandro, you had your hand raised. Sorry
Yeah.
if I butchered your name.
Oh, yeah. About that new learning path, do you have that only in English or we have that in other language too?
Does anyone know how I would change the language on these? Maybe I
As
can-
I
Google Translate.
Well, let's see. Let me I'll go
I-
to my second language and see.
I think
there's
we've only
anything.
done it in English.
yeah, we've not
Um,
explicitly
yeah.
created it in other languages yet. Yeah, so
Jared,
it's only in English at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Here's Terrastatin right here. Definitely give it a check it out. Dominic, it sounds like you've put a lot of thought into this, and it's a really cool project. So
And this is going to be the second part of my September Terraform Community Call reaction video, because Dominic came on, gave a talk for, I don't know, man, close to probably 40 minutes. So lot of interesting conversations were brought up and different topics, as well as like a demo of the tool that he's working on, but some absolute infrastructure as code theory points of view were brought up and raised, and I was kind of feverishly answering questions in chat, so didn't quite get responses or engage fully with what Dominic was sharing. In my follow-on video, I'll definitely be kind of unpacking everything that Dominic showed and talked about and giving my point of view on things. So look forward to that in my next in my upcoming video. Anyways, that's it for part 1 of the September community reaction video. I hope you guys enjoyed this and you appreciate my color commentary. Even though it's kind of weird, I'm also participating in this call as well. But again, it's there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's hard to really share all of what I have to say and all of what I'm thinking without totally dominating the whole meeting. Because I mean, it's about community, right? So we wanna get a lot of people involved and hear a lot of different voices. So anyways, that's it for me. This is the Azure Terraformer, signing off.